In the last segment, I gave an overview of the basic themes of the Constitution, to include limited government and separation of powers. In this segment, I want to concentrate on the powers given to the national government by the Constitution. I mentioned the concept of enumerated powers. How many have heard the term enumerated lately in context of the Constitution? Probably not. Well, the Constitution limited the federal government by its use of enumerated powers, meaning unless a power was specifically granted to the national government, it did not have that power. It limits federal government to only those powers specifically listed in the Constitution. Those enumerated powers were those that the founders thought the states could not do themselves or needed to be done at the national level. James Wilson, a delegate to the Constitutional Convention and Supreme Court Justice, said, "In delegating federal powers, the congressional authority is to be collected not from tacit implication, but from the positive grant expressed in the instrument of union. Everything which is not given is reserved." This concept of enumeration was further emphasized by our founders in the 10th Amendment. It states, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people." The purpose of the 10th Amendment was to ensure the national government didn't become too powerful by making laws concerning areas not under its jurisdiction. So what are the enumerated powers of the government? If you look at Article 1, Section 80 of the Constitution, it lists the specific powers authorized to Congress. Let's look at the list. So Clause 1 has an introduction. It says, "Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States." The second clause says, "To borrow money on the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce with the foreign nations, to establish a uniform rule of naturalization, to coin money and regulate the value thereof, a foreign coin, and to fix the standards of weights and measures, to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting, to establish post offices and post roads, to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries." I'll just make a quick note here. This established copyright and patent laws, but that does not mean that the national government is allowed to pay for the arts and sciences. To constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. To define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas. To declare war. To raise and support armies. To provide and maintain a navy, to make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces, to provide for calling forth the militia, to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, which is the District of Columbia, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. Again, I'll make a note. This only gives authority for the federal lands to be for forts and other needful buildings to operate the military and other government agencies. It does not allow things like national parks, national forests, etc. These are all popular things, but if the people want them, we should amend the Constitution to allow them rather than just do it. And the last clause says to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. Now, can you think of anything the federal government does that is not on this list? Well, that question should elicit a lot of laughter. Maybe a better question would be, can you think of anything on which the federal government doesn't have control in some form or fashion? I can't. The federal government was not intended to have all the power it has today. How did we get where we are today? We don't have time to look at all the abuses, but the most abused is the General Welfare Clause. Today, the left teaches, and most people believe, that phrase allows the federal government to do anything that helps the general welfare of the country or even individuals. Let's look at that and see what the founders had to say about it. That very issue was brought up and discussed in the Federalist 41. In it, Madison said, "It has been urged and echoed that the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, and imposts, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, amounts to an unlimited commission to exercise every power which may be alleged to be necessary for the common defense or general welfare. No stronger proof could be given of the distress under which these writers labor for objections than their stooping to such a misconstruction. Had no other enumeration or definition of the powers of Congress been found in the Constitution than the general expression just cited, the authors of the objection might have had some color for it, though it would have been difficult to find a reason for so awkward a form of describing an authority to legislate in all possible cases. But what color can the objection have when a specification of the objects alluded to by these general terms immediately follows, and is not even separated by a longer pause than a semicolon? For what purpose could the enumeration of particular powers be inserted if these and all others were meant to be included in the preceding general power? Nothing is more natural nor more common than first to use a general phrase and then to explain and qualify it by a recital of particulars. But the idea of an enumeration of particulars which neither explain nor qualify the general meaning and can have no other effect than to confound and mislead is an absurdity. Joseph Story, a Supreme Court justice who wrote in his commentaries on the U.S. Constitution, said a similar thing. He said, if this clause, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, is construed to be an independent and substantive grant of power, it not only renders wholly unimportant and unnecessary the subsequent enumeration of specific powers, but it plainly extends far beyond them and creates a general authority in Congress to pass all laws which they may deem for the common defense or general welfare. Under such circumstances, the Constitution would practically create an unlimited national government. The enumerated powers would tend to be embarrassment and confusion, since they would only give rise to doubts as to the true extent of the general power or of the enumerated powers. The Constitution declares that the powers of Congress shall extend to certain enumerated cases. This specification of particulars evidently excludes all pretensions to a general legislative authority. Why? Because an affirmative grant of special powers would be absurd as well as useless if a general authority were intended. You can see by these words that that introductory paragraph was meant as just that, an introduction and not specific authorization. The specific authorizations are listed in the following paragraph, each starting with the word to. And any other interpretation is an abuse of power and a violation of our Constitution. The bottom line is that for the last 80 years, since Roosevelt's New Deal, the federal government has been legislating well beyond their intended authority. All three branches are acting together in violation of the Constitution. The vast majority of what the federal government does today is an overreach of power. They have been able to get away with it because we, the people, are ignorant of the meaning of the Constitution and let them abuse their power. If the majority of Americans understood this, we could stop the abuses. I will explain more about this in later segments.